What happened to Tacko Fall? Originally, when Tacko came into the NBA, fans weren't necessarily sure how good he would be, but just due to the fact that he was 7'6", there was a ton of excitement around his name to see what he could potentially be in the NBA. But so far, things didn't necessarily go all that well for Tacko Fall. But quickly before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm Choosy Sports, I make opinionated NBA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. But anyways, let's get into it.
Oh yeah, I work with the medics. I'm about to get you injected. I got a couple connections so I can get you prosthetic.
Tacko Fall ended up going undrafted and was actually picked up as an undrafted free agent by the Boston Celtics all the way back in 2019. Now, of course, the expectations for Tacko weren't necessarily all that high due to the fact that, of course, he didn't get drafted that year, but at the same time, Tacko was seen as a very interesting prospect. And if he could potentially figure some things out at the next level, he could be a very valuable player for a lot of teams. Now, of course, the NBA did move away from the Twin Towers approach where you would have two really tall centers on your team that could just rebound very well for you, play great defense, and just do work in the post. But at the same time, whenever you have a player like Tacko who's 7'6", it's always intriguing no matter what time you play in. And although early on Tacko was a fan favorite with the Celtics fan base, he didn't necessarily get all that much playing time in Boston. In his entire rookie season, Tacko only played around 7 games and averaged around 3 points per game on 78% shooting from the field, 2.1 rebounds, and 0.1 assists on only 4 minutes per game as well. Now, of course, most of the time that Tacko did play was in the G League, where he certainly did show certain things, but it was pretty clear that he was a work in progress during his rookie season. Now, the biggest issue with Tacko Fall in his rookie season, and what still is a problem for him today, is the fact that he's just not all that mobile out there. And there's not necessarily something that he could really do about that. Of course, when you're 7'6", you're not going to be all that mobile. Although there are probably certain things he can do to improve upon that, it's just minimal improvements and it wouldn't necessarily change all that much. But the fact that he just can't move all that well with NBA offenses just kind of makes him a liability. And if he would ever have to switch on a point guard or shooting guard, small forward, even power forward, it's going to be very difficult for him to keep up. Or even if he's guarding other centers that maybe are a little quicker, or maybe even not that quick but just decently mobile, it would be very difficult for Tacko to actually keep up with those players. And I think that's the biggest issue with Tacko and the main reason why he's not getting all that many minutes or even getting all that many games played in the NBA so far. Now, of course, a certain way that you can combat the fact that he's just not all that mobile out there is defensively you could just play a zone and basically park Tacko in the paint, which of course would work from time to time. But the issue with the new age NBA is, of course, most of the players on the floor could shoot 3-point jump shots at this point, and when you have 4 or maybe even 5 guys that could clearly hit a 3-point jump shot on the court at the same time, you can't really run a zone on a team like that, and it would just be very difficult having Tacko on the court in a situation like that. But in terms of Tacko's actual abilities offensively, of course he has a really nice ability to grab offensive rebounds and get some nice putback dunks as well as some putback layups as well. He doesn't necessarily have all that many skills offensively, but he does have somewhat of a nice hook shot once getting around the basket and has a decent touch around the basket overall. Of course, can run the pick and lob offense as well pretty effectively, but offensively you're really only using Tacko out there as just like a glass cleaner that can get you some nice putback dunks and stuff like that, but not necessarily anything crazy offensively. Now, talking about his defensive abilities, I did mention the huge flaw that he has just by not being all that mobile, but of course he still does play a decent role defensively. He does a really nice job of just protecting the paint, and he doesn't really need to jump at that size and wingspan that he has, and he pretty much gets a good contest on whoever is driving all the way to the basket and gets a ton of block shots as well. Of course, he could rebound pretty well as well on the defensive side, but at the same time, he isn't necessarily all that strong, so he doesn't box out players all that effectively, I would say, and does get out-muscled by certain players, but he kind of makes up for it with his great size and wingspan, I will say that. Now, in Tacko's second season, he did get a little more of an opportunity, but still he barely got an opportunity. He only played 18 games that season, averaging around 2.6 points per game on 72% shooting from the field, 3 rebounds, and 0.2 assists. Now, actually watching Tacko on the court, I guess you could say he looked a little more confident and comfortable out there. He definitely did rebound pretty effectively, I would say, in the limited minutes that he did get. He played some decent defense as just being a defensive anchor for the Celtics. Offensively, he showed a pretty decent touch around the basket. Very rarely he did show the ability to hit a nice little mid-range jump shot, but overall Tacko was basically the same player in his second season that he was in his first. And then in Tacko's third season, which is this year, he ended up signing with the Cleveland Cavaliers, where once again he barely played any games this year, only playing around 11 games, and he's averaging around 1 point per game on 41% shooting from the field, 2.1 rebounds, and 0.2 assists. But once again this season, he's basically only playing in the G League, and maybe you can say he made nominal improvements this year compared to last year, but basically from his rookie season to this year, he's basically the same player. Now, it's kind of difficult for a guy who's 7'5" to really improve certain aspects of his game, but I would say certain things that he could improve upon is maybe get somewhat more of a post game, improve that hook shot around the basket, just have somewhat of a nicer touch around the basket, although he does have a decent touch. Maybe also try to continue improve that jump shot and maybe get a more consistent mid-range jump shot and maybe even extend that range all the way out to the 3-point line if you ever really wanted to, but I don't necessarily think that's something you would need to have, obviously. But of course, the main thing that he does need to focus on is that defense, as I mentioned before. Now, if he is able to figure out that issue somewhat and be a little more mobile out and be able to somewhat keep up with some players, I think he certainly does have a place in the NBA. Maybe a guy coming off the bench playing around 10 to 15 minutes per game, just get some nice rebounds for you, play some decent defense, and overall just be a decent player out there. But if he's not able to do so, I don't necessarily think he has a real place in the NBA, at least in my opinion, because I think that's a huge issue for him. But long term, what I would like to see from Tacko is probably just to play a little bit more, a few more seasons in the G League, to continue to improve his game a little bit season after season, maybe improve his confidence level a little bit, and really just work on certain aspects of his game. And if he could eventually get to the point that I mentioned before, then I think he could certainly be a decent player in the league and have some minutes. Now, if that's going to be with the Cleveland Cavaliers or maybe another team, if the Cavs do eventually just not re-sign him, I don't necessarily know, but I will say if the Cavs do move on from Tacko, I personally do see another team looking into and probably picking him up for their G League team and maybe see if they could do anything with him, just solely due to the fact that he is at that 7'6" size. Now, hopefully for Tacko's sake, maybe he could stay in the Cavaliers for a while and be a bench player averaging around 10 to 15 minutes, or maybe he goes to another team but he stays with a certain team for a little bit. And honestly, I don't necessarily see Tacko as being much more than just a bench player, and of course I would love to be wrong about that. Hopefully he becomes a much better player than I project, but honestly at this point, based upon how he's been playing in the NBA for 3 seasons so far, I don't necessarily see him being much more than that, but we'll see what happens going forward for Tacko Fall. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think Tacko Fall could potentially be a star in the NBA one day, or maybe a consistent NBA player, or do you think he's going to be out of the league pretty soon? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these 2 videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out guys.
Oh yeah, I work with the medics. I'm about to get you injected. I got a couple connections so I can get you prosthetic. Hope you can't go where I'm headed.